If I told you I could false chord scream, you'd probably be surprised.
Who'd have thought I'd be able to express myself in this raw, primal way?
One of my favorite metal bands who signed to one of the biggest labels even asked plain old me to share my voice with them. But what most people don't know is that before I figured it out, I sounded like ass. I then wasted 4 years following bad advice, wrecking my throat, and thinking I'd never be able to do it. So how'd I unlock my screams? Well, I'm gonna share my journey and the 4 breakthroughs that helped me growl so you can speedrun it without wrecking your voice. I'll also tell you the bad advice I paid for that slowed me down for a year. I'm also gonna see,
Is it possible to teach my girlfriend who isn't into metal to growl in just 1 day?
when I first started, I did what most people do. Almost every single tutorial said,
push from your stomach and
Do a deep sigh.
Deep sigh or dog bark.
like a kid who believed in Santa Claus, I was filled with hope.
Oh, I was so naive.
This is me after 2 weeks of practice. Now, you might hear that and think, David, that sounds good. But when you compare that to famous false quarters, I just sounded different. I'd also run out of air quick. Is this normal? Is this just how my screams sound?
Should I get a vocal teacher?
I really don't want to spend money. Plus, there's plenty of free advice online. So many people never use vocal coaches and they still figure out how to scream. So I joined screaming subreddits and Discord servers to post my screams. But then I saw the replies. It was the blind leading the blind. Worst of all, most of the people giving advice didn't even sound good. Oh, hell no. I have got to get out of this hell. So I looked up my favorite screaming teacher online. This is someone who went to school for the voice. They studied for years. They were someone official. I looked at their prices and grit my teeth. It was expensive, but this was finally gonna be my ticket out of this confusing mess. So I sent payment and booked a month and a half with them. I never expected these lessons would hurt more than help. During the lessons, they taught me that false chord screams happen when you flap these tissues to make distortion.
Finally, some good information.
I then nervously prepared to show them my false chords. Did I sound correct? Was my air loss normal? This would decide my future. Thus as my fry! Thus as my fries! By this time, I'd unlocked my fry scream, and that's a whole nother video. I made some covers and taught it to friends. But when it came to false chords, something didn't feel quite right. I felt doubt, and it would whisper, "You sound cringy." But I'd think back to my conversations with my teacher.
Your false chords sound great, David. It's normal to lose air quick during false chord. Arch Enemy actually writes short lyrics because of this.
So I tried to bury my doubt with practice. 6 months went by. The doubt grew. People would laugh at you on stage. 1 year went by. The doubt grew even more. Give up. You'll never be more than just a fan. 2 years later, on my 30th birthday, I planned a dinner with my friends. While driving there, I was listening to Slipknot. I finally broke. I pulled over. I finally came face to face with my gut. I hated how I sounded. He could false chord scream for an entire show. He had more distortion and didn't run out of breath. False chord tip. I didn't know this at the time, but the problem was that my throat was wide open during my screams, so I was getting a bit of distortion, but I was losing air really quickly, like a balloon with a hole in it. So you have to pinch that hole so it slows air loss. This is called compression. When you do this to your false chords, you'll also get more distortion. But at the time, I didn't know this. So confused and frustrated, I threw caution to the wind. I tried to copy his sound. I pushed harder and flexed tighter. By the time I got to dinner, not only did I make zero progress, my voice was completely blown out from pushing too hard. I could barely speak. And although it was supposed to be a happy birthday celebration, deep down I felt pathetic. I spent 2 years practicing and couldn't stand my false chords. Not to mention, I just blew out my voice like a beginner.
I felt worthless. I had to go back to the drawing board.
Hey, this is my girlfriend Yanni. She agreed to be a part of this video if I cook her dinner. She's never screamed before, but today I'm gonna teach her to false chord scream. And if we succeed, I'm gonna have her record an original metal song and hopefully blow everybody's minds. So we'll see if that happens.
We'll see.
For now, let's get back to my journey of learning to false chord scream. So the next day, I went back to YouTube for more research. Like before, most people said to do a variation of the deep sigh, but now I knew there was more to it than that. I came across a newer teacher with information I hadn't heard.
They spoke about how using something called your arytenoids would lead to an awesome false chord sound. I'd heard of this word before, but nobody ever spoke in depth about it. Could this be the answer to my problems? I hired them on the spot. I was hopeful.
I had no idea this was about to lead to a year of vocal pain. On the call, he showed me how to locate my arytenoids, a completely new part of my throat. I tried using them to make a sound.
Instantly, it made me cough. I felt like I'd swallowed glass. Are you sure this is it? I asked, coughing. I felt like a kid trying a pack of cigarettes. Yep, he told me. He explained that the pain I felt was part of the process.
If you practice with it, these tissues will loosen up, you'll get the distortion you want, and the pain will disappear.
This went against every tutorial I saw, saying to avoid pain at all costs. Could I really trust this guy? Is this actually safe? Will I cause permanent vocal damage?
On top of all this, so far I sounded really bad.
But I thought back to my 15-year-old self. It was his dream to learn to false chord scream. What would he think if I stopped now?
So every day, I began practicing for 6 hours. I sounded terrible, felt terrible, and at one point, think I tasted blood.
But slowly, I noticed that 1 out of every 30 attempts I did, I got a little bit of distortion. After 3 months of practicing this, I could do it pretty consistently.
It was lower, more distorted, and I could hold it out long.
I became happier and happier. I'd overcome my fears and triumphed once again. Except it came back.
This still feels scratchy. You're gonna wreck your voice. You sound burpy. Stick to guitar. No band will take you.
It wasn't until I recorded a cover screaming along to a Spirit Box song that I finally accepted it. It just wasn't good enough.
This was also not the true false chord scream. False chord tip. A common problem is that people use their arytenoids instead of their false chords. You're probably using arytenoids if you're sounding burpy, if it hurts, or if it feels super low in your throat. Now, don't get me wrong. You can use arytenoids to make a sound similar to false chords and can close them to slow down air loss. But at the end of the day, if you ain't using false chords, you ain't doing a false chord scream.
So I went on YouTube again. This time I was numb. I bought one person's scream course and binged it.
I hired another screaming teacher.
I asked some friends of mine who knew how to false chord scream. Nobody had answers.
They'd either tell me that that's just how my false chords sound,
Or tell me to try doing the deep sigh or dog bark.
when it didn't work, they all said, just practice.
I felt like I exhausted all my options.
I wasted 3 years of my life chasing this dream and made no progress. Meanwhile, I'd read comments on tutorials saying, wow, thanks to this video, I could instantly false chord scream. I started to think, maybe some are just born for this stage, but I'm just meant to be a fan. Will I ever amount to anything?
These cats are 2 angels sent from heaven.
Here's Yanni screaming some sick false chords over her first song. Big win, right? David proved his point that he's a good teacher.
Well, things aren't so black and white. Let me explain how we got here.
During her lesson, I tried multiple methods to get her to false chord. First approach. Nothing. Next approach. Nothing. The next thing that you can do is let's have you. But guess what finally worked? The deep sigh and dog bark method. I'd spent years getting nowhere with this approach, but she... Were all those sigh and bark tutorials right after all? Was she one of the chosen few meant for false chords while you and I weren't? How could she betray me like that? Would I have to break up with her?
I love you.
Let's get back to my personal journey. At this point, I decided to switch my focus to only fry screams. I mean, yeah, it wasn't as loud and as powerful as false chords, but I like how I sounded with my fry. I did fry covers and felt pretty okay about it. I'd help other people do fry screams, and they were getting it. And I was fine. One day, while sitting at home and messing around with a head voice fry scream, I noticed that during one of my attempts, there was a bit of a crunchy texture that came out of me. What the heck is that? I asked myself. But I kept messing around and stumbled upon it again. It was so subtle that I barely noticed it. Could it be? I leaned more and more into it. Then it came out bright and crunchy. I didn't run out of air. It sounded much more distorted than the first technique I tried 3 years ago and the arytenoid screams. Also, it sounded exactly like high false chord screams that some of my favorite bands had been doing. I immediately texted my friend and said, I think I'm onto something. And I was right. It was starting to be my true false chords. My past coaches and courses all said just practice, but that wasn't it. I'd just been approaching it wrong. Messing with fry screams made me discover twang, which made my false chords distort in a way that finally sounded sick. Excited as I wasn't done. I wanted to get a low growl like I Prevail. But every time I tried, the distortion would go away. But since I made a breakthrough that finally sounded right, I now had a fire inside me to see this through to the end.
A, B, C!
Let's talk about Yanni. There's many lessons we can learn from her journey, but I want to focus on one, because without knowing this, people often give up trying to false chord. This lesson is called survivorship bias. So Yanni has some habits she isn't even aware of. First, she's got compression. She's about at a 7 out of 10, so there's some room for improvement, but she's otherwise pretty good. Next, she avoids using her arytenoids. Then she uses twang when making noise. The main habit she didn't have was using her false chords, and it just so happened that the sigh method helped her figure out that last piece. And from there, she developed that into a fairly solid false chord scream in 30 minutes.
R2, dip.
Now, let's say Dale asks Yanni how to scream. She'd probably say, just do a deep sigh. It worked for me. So Dale gives it a shot. And without him knowing, he's missing out on the compression, and he's missing out on using twang. So it doesn't work or sound right, but he thinks to himself, all right, I guess I should just practice. So every day he practices while getting ready for work, on his lunch break, and after dinner. Days turn into weeks, weeks turn into months, and months turn into years. At some point, he eventually thinks, I guess I'm not meant for false chord screaming, and gives up. Though Yanni wouldn't be lying with her advice to Dale, she'd be blind to the fact that she had good habits as a foundation, and she wouldn't know how to teach what she's blind to. And this is why most false chord advice is oversimplified or vague. They're often taught by people that only needed simple advice and some practice. This is survivorship bias. And I was like Dale, except I never gave up. I knew I wanted to go lower with my false chords, so I tried everything. I tried different tongue and mouth shapes. I started from my head voice and tried to lower it to my mixed and chest voice. Even though improvement was slow, I now had faith. Faith in myself. So I practiced in the morning, I practiced in the night, and after I was done practicing, I practiced some more. The whispers of my insecurities got quieter and quieter. And one day, I finally unlocked the false chords of my dreams. I'll show you in a second. Then I used the pain of my journey to make it my mission to help others unlock theirs.
I go! Yay, Basie!
I sucked ass for years. There are times I felt like I tried everything.
But somewhere along the way, I learned that this was about more than just learning to false chord scream.
It was about proving I was stronger than my self-doubt. And that's what I want you to take away from this video.
It does not matter how slowly you go, as long as you do not stop.
Now I finally present to you my girlfriend's first metal song.
These cats are too divine, fuzzy creatures, so precious and fine. Their little paws, pink toebeans with deadly knives. These cats are too angels sent from heaven. Though